Captain Jake Morrison stood in the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Alliance headquarters and tried to keep his expression neutral. Around him, the representatives of 100 alien species sat in their designated sections, some floating in containment fields, others perched on specialized seats designed for their unusual body structures. The chamber always made Jake feel small, and today that feeling grew stronger with every passing second. Captain Morrison, the Vrelian ambassador announced, his three eyes blinking in sequence as he consulted his datapad. Your next assignment has been approved by the Council. Jake straightened his uniform. After 5 years, exploring uncharted systems and making first contact with 2 new species, he had earned this moment. His friends back on Earth said he would probably get the Mars Colony Liaison position, or maybe even a seat on the Defense Coordination Committee. His mother had already started telling neighbors her son would be working at the heart of human diplomacy. You will serve as diplomatic advisor to Princess Vera of Takron 7, the Vrelian continued. The chamber fell silent for exactly 2 seconds. Then, the whispers started. Jake felt his stomach drop. He knew that name. Every officer in the Alliance knew that name, though usually as the punchline to jokes. Takron 7, the dead world, the forgotten planet, the place where careers went to die. A delegate from the Zenthari Empire let out what could only be described as a laugh, though it sounded like wind chimes being smashed. The human gets the Barren princess, someone whispered loudly enough for half the chamber to hear. How fitting. Is there a problem, Captain? The Vrelian asked, and Jake could see the amusement in those alien eyes. No, sir, Jake said, though his jaw was tight. I just want to understand the scope of the assignment. Right. The Vrelian's mouth parts twisted into what passed for a smile among his people. Princess Vera's father, King Orin, requested an advisor. The position has been vacant for 3 years because no one accepted it. We thought perhaps a human might be interested. The way he said, human, made it clear what he really meant. Humans were still the newcomers here, barely a century into galactic politics, and plenty of older species thought Earth's people were too eager and too naive. Jake pulled up the file on his handheld device, while the Council moved on to other business. What he read made his heart sink further. Takron 7 was a desert world with a population of barely 2 million. Once, thousands of years ago, it had been a garden planet, but ecological collapse had turned it into an endless wasteland. The planet produced nothing. No minerals worth mining, no crops, no technology, no art that anyone wanted. It survived on minimal aid from the Alliance, the kind of charity money that barely kept people fed. Princess Vera herself was 34 years old, unmarried, and had been rejected by 17 different Alliance families when her father tried to arrange political marriages. The file listed her education, which surprised Jake. She had a doctorate in biochemistry from a prestigious Zenthari university, but the notes indicated she had published nothing of significance. There was a photograph attached to the file. She looked tired, her dark hair pulled back severely, her eyes holding the expression of someone who had stopped expecting good news a long time ago. Hey, Morrison. Jake looked up to see Commander Lisa Grant approaching. She was one of the few other humans at headquarters today, working in the Fleet Coordination Office. Word travels fast, Jake muttered. Everyone's talking about it, Lisa said quietly. The Vrelian delegate's aide was telling people it's babysitting duty for the 2 biggest disappointments in the Alliance. A failed princess and an over-eager human. Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting angry would only make things worse. Maybe it won't be so bad. Lisa gave him a sympathetic look. Jake, Takron 7 is a dead end. Everyone knows it. People who go there don't come back to good positions. The planet contributes nothing, and the royal family is basically ceremonial at this point. King Orin only asked for an advisor because the Alliance requires all member worlds to have one. He probably expected them to send a junior clerk, not a decorated captain. That night, Jake sat in his small apartment on the space station and stared at the file on Tachron 7. His friend Paul Dixon, an engineer with the Exploration Corps, had come over with drinks. "You could refuse," Paul said. "Take the career hit and wait for something better. And confirm what they all think?" Jake shook his head. "That humans can't handle the difficult assignments?" "Jake, this isn't difficult. It's pointless. There's a difference." But Jake kept reading the file, going deeper into the data than the summary pages. Something caught his attention. The atmospheric composition of Tachron 7 was unusual. The planet had high concentrations of certain rare minerals in its air, the kind that sometimes indicated unusual geological processes below the surface. He pulled up Princess Vera's academic record. Her doctoral thesis had been on atmospheric biochemistry and its relationship to dormant ecosystems. She had proposed that some dead worlds might not be truly dead, just waiting for the right catalyst to trigger revival. Her paper had been reviewed poorly, dismissed as wishful thinking by established scientists. "What are you looking at?" Paul asked. "Maybe nothing," Jake said slowly. "Or maybe everyone's been looking at this planet wrong." "Jake, don't do this to yourself. Don't try to find meaning where there isn't any." But Jake couldn't stop reading. Princess Vera had published 3 more papers after her doctorate, each one proposing methods to revive Tachron 7. Each one had been rejected by major scientific journals. The reviews were harsh, some even mocking. One reviewer had written, "The princess should accept reality rather than chasing impossible dreams." Jake closed the file and looked at Paul. "I'm taking the assignment." "You're serious?" "I'm serious. If nothing else, maybe I can help her publish her research properly. And if everyone's wrong about that planet." He trailed off. Paul sighed. "You're going to be the joke of the entire alliance." "I've been called worse," Jake said. But inside, he felt the weight of what he was accepting. His career was probably over before it really began. His mother would be disappointed. His friends would pity him. Still, something about Princess Vera's tired eyes in that photograph stuck with him. Something about a woman who kept trying even after the galaxy told her to stop. 3 days later, Jake boarded a transport ship to Tachron 7. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, he wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life, or if maybe, just maybe, everyone else was making a mistake by not paying attention. The transport ship descended through the thin atmosphere of Tachron 7, and Jake pressed his face against the window. Below him stretched endless sand dunes painted in shades of red and brown. Occasionally, he spotted the dark shapes of dried riverbeds cutting through the desert like old scars. There were no green spaces, no bodies of water, nothing but sand and rock as far as he could see. The capital city appeared on the horizon, a cluster of low buildings huddled together as if trying to hide from the wind. The structures were made from the same red stone as the desert around them, making the city almost invisible until you were right on top of it. A single palace rose from the center, not grand like the buildings Jake had seen on other worlds, but functional and worn. The ship landed at a small spaceport, where 3 other vessels sat covered in dust. A protocol officer waited at the bottom of the ramp, a thin Tachron man in faded robes who looked like the wind might blow him away. "Captain Morrison," the man said in heavily accented standard language. "I am Coordinator Ben. Welcome to Tachron 7. Princess Vera sends her greetings, but could not meet you personally today. She is conducting research in the outer settlements." Jake grabbed his bags and followed Ben to a ground vehicle. As they drove through the city, Jake noticed how quiet everything was. People moved slowly in the streets, their clothes wrapped tight against the blowing sand. Children played in small courtyards, but there were far fewer than he expected for a city this size. The buildings showed signs of decay, with cracks in walls and faded paint that no one had bothered to fix. "How often do supply ships arrive?" Jake asked. "Once every 2 months," Ben replied. "Sometimes longer if there are delays. We grow what little food we can in underground gardens. But it is never enough. And available." HFY never signed. The palace was bigger up close, but still modest compared to royal residences Jake had seen in the Alliance records. His quarters were simple. A room with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked out over the desert. Dust had gathered in the corners, despite someone obviously trying to clean before his arrival. Jake spent the first day reviewing his diplomatic duties, which turned out to be almost nothing. His job was essentially to attend council meetings, file reports to the Alliance, and assist with any requests the royal family made. Previous advisors had treated it as a vacation, spending most of their time in their quarters and leaving after the minimum required service period. But Jake had not come here for a vacation. On his second day, he told Ben he wanted to tour the settlements outside the capital. Ben looked surprised, but arranged a vehicle. They drove for hours across the desert, visiting 3 small towns where families struggled to survive. The people were polite, but wary of the human officer. They had seen advisors before. Officials who looked around for a day and then disappeared back to their comfortable rooms. Jake drank the recycled water they offered, even though it tasted metallic. He examined the crystal formations that jutted from the sand near one settlement, running his scanner over them and noting the unusual readings. He watched how the few struggling plants at the edges of dried riverbeds seemed to pulse with some kind of life force during certain hours of the day. "The plants," Jake said to Ben. "Do they always behave like that?" "Like what, Captain?" "They seem more active in the evening. See how the leaves spread wider when the temperature drops?" Ben shrugged. "I suppose. No one really studies them. They do not grow enough to matter." On his 4th day on Takran 7, Jake finally met Princess Vera. She arrived at the palace covered in dust, carrying equipment cases and looking exhausted. When Ben introduced them in the throne room, she barely glanced at Jake before setting down her cases. "Another advisor," she said in a flat voice. "How long do you plan to stay, Captain Morrison?" "As long as I'm needed, Your Highness." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "No one is needed here, Captain. This is where the Alliance sends people to fulfill a requirement. You will file your reports, sit through boring council meetings, and leave in 6 months like all the others. I do not blame you. There is nothing for you to do here." "I read your doctoral thesis," Jake said. That made her pause. She looked at him properly for the first time, her dark eyes studying his face. "You read my thesis?" "My thesis. And your follow-up papers." The work on atmospheric mineral catalysis was particularly interesting. Ever. Princess Vera's expression shifted from tired indifference to suspicion. "Are you mocking me, Captain? Because if you are, I have had enough of that from actual scientists. I do not need it from a military officer." "I'm not mocking you," Jake said firmly. "I'm an Exploration Corps officer. I've surveyed 40 dead worlds looking for signs of recoverable resources. Your atmospheric analysis of Takran 7 reminded me of data I collected on 3 other planets that everyone said were worthless." She stared at him for a long moment. "Come with me," she finally said. 41, 235. "Come with me 5, 23, 23, 235. Jake followed Princess Vera through the palace corridors to a section that looked rarely used. She unlocked a heavy door and led him into a laboratory that was clearly her private workspace. Equipment covered every surface. Some of it new, but most of it old, and repaired multiple times. Charts covered the walls, showing atmospheric data, mineral compositions, and ecological models. "This is where I work," Vera said, and for the first time Jake heard something other than exhaustion in her voice. "For 12 years I have been trying to prove that Takran 7 can be saved. that my world is not truly dead, just dormant. She pulled up a holographic display showing the planet's ecosystem from thousands of years ago. Forests, rivers, oceans, cities filled with life. Then she showed the collapse, how quickly everything had died. The galactic scientific community says the ecosystem is gone forever, Vera continued. They say I am wasting my time. But look at this. She changed the display to show current atmospheric readings. The minerals are still here. The bacterial life underground is not extinct, just dormant. The water table still exists deep below the surface. Everything we need is here, Captain. We just need the right catalyst to wake it up. Jake moved closer to the display, his mind racing. You've been working on creating that catalyst. For years. But every grant request is denied. Every collaboration offer is rejected. The Alliance considers Takron 7 a lost cause, so they will not fund research to save it. And I do not have the resources to do it alone. Jake thought about the crystal formations he had seen, the strange plants, the unusual atmospheric readings. He thought about his training in ecological restoration and the terraforming projects he had worked on. Show me everything, he said. All your research, all your data, everything you've tried. Vera looked at him with an expression that was half hope and half fear, as if she was afraid to believe he was serious. Captain, even if you help me, even if we work together, the chances of success are minimal. You would be risking your career for something that will probably fail. My career is already over, Jake said with a slight smile. They sent me here because I'm disposable. So let's use that. Let's try something everyone says is impossible. For the first time since Jake arrived on Takron 7, he saw Princess Vera smile. It was a small smile, cautious and uncertain, but it was real. Then let us begin, she said, and pulled up her research files. They worked through the night, and neither of them noticed when the desert sun rose again over the horizon. 2 months of late nights in the laboratory led to a breakthrough. Jake and Princess Vera discovered that combining her atmospheric catalyst research with human agricultural techniques created a reaction neither had expected. The dormant minerals in Takron 7's soil responded to specific energy frequencies, and when properly activated, they could sustain plant growth without external water sources. We need to test this on a large scale, Vera said, staring at the successful results from their 10th experiment. A laboratory sample means nothing. We need to prove it works outside, in the real desert. Jake knew she was right, but he also knew what that meant. We need approval from your father and funding from somewhere. This won't be cheap. The next morning, they stood before King Orin and his council of advisors in the throne room. The king was an older man with gray hair and the same tired eyes as his daughter. He listened patiently as Vera explained their proposal, but the council members looked skeptical from the start. You want to convert the eastern wasteland into a test site, one council member said slowly. The area that has been dead for 3,000 years. Yes, Vera replied. We need at least 50 square kilometers to prove the concept works. And if it fails? Another council member asked. We will have wasted resources we can barely afford. If it fails, we are no worse off than we are now, Vera said. And Jake heard the frustration in her voice. We are dying slowly. Our population shrinks every year. Young people leave because there is no future here. What exactly do we have to lose? King Orin studied his daughter for a long moment. You have been saying this for many years, Vera. What makes this time different? Captain Morrison, Vera said simply. He has experience. I lack. He understands ecological restoration. Together, we found something I could not find alone. The king looked at Jake. And you believe this will work, Captain? Jake chose his words carefully. Your Majesty, I believe it has a reasonable chance of success. I have seen similar mineral compositions on other worlds. The science is sound. But Princess Vera is right. We need to test it on a real scale. The council debated for 2 hours. Finally, King Orin raised his hand for silence. You may proceed with your experiment, but our treasury can provide very little. You will need to find other sources of funding. End quote. It was better than nothing, but not by much. Jake immediately sent messages to Earth, calling in every favor he had accumulated during his years of service. His old crew members responded first. Lisa Grant sent a message saying she had vacation time saved up and would come to help. Paul Dixon said he could bring some engineering equipment that might be useful. A few others promised to contribute what they could, though most warned him that he was becoming a joke back at headquarters. Morrison's building sandcastles now, one message read. Everyone's talking about it. They're running bets on how long until you admit defeat. The Galactic Alliance responded to Jake's formal funding request with a rejection. The Science Committee said the project lacked sufficient evidence of viability. The Vrelian Empire, which controlled most energy production in the galaxy, sent observers to Tachron 7 explicitly to document what they called an expected failure of human overconfidence. The two Vrelian observers, scientists named Kelth and Vorn, arrived 3 weeks after Jake and Vera began setting up the test site. They walked through the equipment with expressions of barely hidden contempt. You truly believe you can revive a dead ecosystem with this? Kelth asked, gesturing at the energy generators Jake and Paul had assembled. We're going to try, Jake said, evenly. The Vrelian Empire attempted similar projects on 6 worlds over the past century, Vorn added. All failed. Your human optimism is amusing, but misguided. After they left, Paul threw a wrench into the sand. I hate those guys. Ignore them, Jake said. Let's focus on the work. But the work was harder than either Jake or Vera had anticipated. The desert fought them at every turn. Sandstorms damaged equipment twice in the first month. The energy generators overheated in the extreme daytime temperatures. The crystal matrices they were synthesizing kept breaking down before they could be properly installed. Vera worked until she collapsed from exhaustion. Jake found her asleep in the laboratory one morning, her head on her desk, surrounded by failed calculations. He gently woke her and insisted she rest, but she refused. We only have one chance at this, she said. If the demonstration fails, no one will ever fund another attempt. My world will die, and it will be my fault for not working hard enough. It won't be your fault, Jake said firmly, and you working yourself to death won't help anyone. Lisa arrived in the 6th week with supplies she had somehow convinced a transport captain to carry for free. She took one look at the operation and immediately started reorganizing their work schedule to be more efficient. You two are terrible at project management, she told them. You're doing everything the hard way. Paul focused on the engineering challenges, redesigning the energy distribution system 3 times before finding a configuration that could withstand the harsh environment. He worked alongside Tachron engineers who initially doubted him but gradually began to respect his skills. The local population watched the project with a mixture of hope and fear. Some came out to help, offering labor even though they had little faith in success. Others stayed away, afraid to hope for something that might not happen. In the 10th week, Lisa made a discovery that changed everything. She was running soil analysis on samples from different depths when she found something unexpected. Jake, Vera, you need to see this, she called out one evening. They rushed to her workstation where she had microscope images displayed. Look at this. The bacterial life in the deep soil samples. It's not dead. We knew that, Vera said. It's dormant. No, look closer, Lisa insisted. It's not just dormant. It's waiting. See these cellular structures? They're designed to respond to specific environmental triggers. These bacteria have been waiting for thousands of years for the right conditions to activate. Jake leaned in close, his heart racing. Can we trigger them with our energy system? I think so, Lisa said. But we need to modify the frequency distribution. If we can wake up the bacteria at the same time we activate the minerals, we might get a cascading effect. The bacteria could help spread the ecological revival faster than we calculated. They worked through the night, redesigning their approach. Vera's hands shook as she ran the new calculations. If this works, if the bacteria respond the way Lisa thinks they will, we could see results in days instead of months. And if it doesn't work? Paul asked. Then we fail spectacularly in front of the entire galaxy, Jake said. The Vrelians have been sending daily reports to their empire. Other species are watching too. Everyone expects us to fail. 3 months after they started, the test site was ready. The energy generators were in place, the synthesized minerals distributed through the soil, and the activation sequence programmed. The galactic media had picked up the story, mostly as entertainment. Headlines called it, "The Barren Princess's Last Hope," and "Human Stubbornness Meets Desert Reality." King Orin came to observe, along with most of his council. The Vrelian observers brought recording equipment. A dozen other alien journalists set up cameras at the edge of the test site. Princess Vera stood before them all, no longer looking apologetic or uncertain. She wore formal robes of deep blue, her hair pulled back, her chin raised high. "My world has been dismissed as worthless for 3,000 years, she said clearly. "Today, we will show you that Tachron 7 never died. It only slept, and we have found a way to wake it up." Jake stood beside her, his hand on the activation control. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "Ready," she replied. He pressed the button, and the energy generators hummed to life. The real test was about to begin. The energy generators pulsed with blue light, spreading outward from the center of the test site in rippling waves. The synthesized minerals began to glow faintly beneath the sand, creating patterns that looked like veins of light running through the desert floor. Everyone watched in silence as the activation sequence completed. Then nothing happened. 1 hour passed. The cameras kept recording. The Vrelian observers exchanged knowing looks. Some of the journalists started packing up their equipment, already composing stories about the failed experiment in their heads. "Give it time," Vera said, but Jake could hear the worry in her voice. 2 hours passed. King Orin looked sad, but not surprised. He had seen his daughter disappointed too many times before. The council members whispered among themselves, already planning how to explain the wasted resources to the population. Kelth, the Vrelian observer, approached Jake with a smug expression. "Perhaps now you understand why established science rejected this approach. The galaxy runs on proven methods, not wishful thinking." Jake wanted to argue, but he had no evidence to counter with. The test site looked exactly as dead as it had before they started. Paul checked the equipment 3 times, confirming everything was working as designed. Lisa ran soil samples but found no immediate changes. As the sun set on the first day, most of the observers left. Only a few journalists remained, hoping for something dramatic to fail so they would have better footage. The Vrelians stayed, wanting to document the moment when Jake and Vera finally admitted defeat. That night, Jake found Vera sitting alone at the edge of the test site, staring at the dark sand. "I was so certain," she said quietly. "All the calculations were correct. The laboratory tests worked perfectly. I do not understand what went wrong. See their work." Jake sat beside her. "Maybe it just needs more time. Waking up an ecosystem after 3,000 years might not happen in a few hours." "Or maybe everyone was right," Vera replied. "Maybe I have been chasing an impossible dream. Maybe my world really is dead, and I am just too stubborn to accept it." "If you're stubborn, then so am I," Jake said. "And I don't give up this easily." They sat together in silence, watching the stars appear above the desert. On the second day, Paul noticed something on his environmental sensors. "The underground temperature is changing," he announced. "It's subtle, Only a few degrees, but it's spreading from the center of the test site outward. What does that mean? King Orin asked. He had returned with a small group of advisors, unable to stay away, despite his fear of disappointment. It might mean the bacteria are activating, Lisa said, running new tests. If the bacteria wake up, they generate heat as they begin metabolizing. But I need more time to confirm. The journalists who had left came rushing back. If the experiment was showing any signs of success, they wanted to be there to record it. By the afternoon of the second day, Paul's sensors detected underground water movement. Something was happening below the surface that they could not see. The energy system was drawing moisture from deep aquifers that had been locked away for millennia. The water is rising, Paul said, his voice filled with excitement. Slowly, but it's definitely rising. On the third day, the first visible change appeared. A tiny green shoot pushed through the sand near the center of the test site. Lisa ran to examine it, her scanner confirming what her eyes could barely believe. It was a native Takron plant species, one that had been extinct for 3,000 years. By evening, there were a dozen shoots. By the next morning, there were hundreds. The transformation accelerated rapidly after that. The dormant bacteria spread through the soil, activated by the energy system and the changing conditions. They began breaking down minerals and releasing nutrients that had been locked in the sand. The underground water reached the surface in small springs that quickly became streams. Within a week, the test site was unrecognizable. Green covered the ground in patches that grew larger each day. The streams carved new paths through the sand, creating small pools where insects began to appear, somehow surviving in dormant states until water returned. Native grasses grew tall enough to wave in the wind. The air itself smelled different, carrying moisture and the scent of growing things. The galactic media coverage shifted dramatically. What had been a story about failure became a story about miracle. Journalists interviewed Jake and Vera constantly. Scientists from across the galaxy requested their data. The test site became famous overnight. Princess Vera stood before the Galactic Alliance Council via hologram transmission, and this time the chamber was silent with attention, not mockery. The technology you are seeing on Takron 7 is not just about my world, she explained clearly. This approach can work on hundreds of planets, currently classified as dead or dying. Worlds that the Alliance has written off could be restored. Populations that struggle to survive could thrive. The council members leaned forward, suddenly very interested. The Vrelian ambassador looked distinctly uncomfortable. The energy system is self-sustaining, Vera continued. Once activated, it requires no external power. It actually improves as it interacts with the native ecosystem, and the cost is a fraction of traditional terraforming methods. Questions flooded in from every direction. How quickly could the technology be adapted? How many worlds could benefit? Who would control the distribution? That last question made Vera pause. She glanced at Jake, who stood beside her outside the camera view. He nodded encouragingly. I propose forming a coalition, Vera said. An alliance of worlds that have been dismissed or ignored by the major powers. We can share this technology freely among ourselves and help each other rebuild. The galaxy has left us behind for too long. It is time we helped ourselves. The chamber erupted in debate. The major empires looked alarmed at the suggestion, but representatives from smaller worlds, from struggling colonies, from species that had been marginalized, began reaching out to Vera immediately after the transmission ended. Within days, 17 worlds expressed interest in joining what Vera called the Coalition of Emerging Worlds. They were planets everyone had forgotten about, species no one took seriously, populations barely surviving on the edges of galactic civilization. The Vrelian Empire responded by sending a formal delegation to Takron 7. They offered to buy exclusive rights to the technology. When Vera refused, they offered her a marriage alliance with a high-ranking Vrelian noble. When she refused that too, Their tone became threatening. "You are making powerful enemies, Princess," the lead Vrelian delegate warned. "The Empire controls energy production across the galaxy. We do not appreciate competition." "Then perhaps the Empire should have thought about that before dismissing my research for 12 years, Vera replied coolly. Jake stood beside her during that meeting, and the Vrelian delegates noticed. They noticed too how Vera and Jake worked together, how they communicated with glances, how they had become a team that functioned as one unit. After the Vrelians left, Vera turned to Jake with concern in her eyes. "I have made us targets. The Empire will not simply accept losing their energy monopoly." "Then we need to move quickly," Jake said. "Get the coalition organized. Share the technology with worlds that need it most. Create a network they cannot easily dismantle." "This is not what you signed up for when you came here," Vera said softly. "You were supposed to file reports and attend boring meetings. Now you are helping me reshape galactic politics." Jake smiled. "I was supposed to be babysitting a failed princess on a dead world. Instead, I found the most brilliant person I have ever met, and a planet that refuses to die. I think I got the better deal." Vera's expression softened in a way Jake had never seen before. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else would." "Thank you for giving me something worth believing in," Jake replied. Around them, Takran 7 continued its transformation. The test site now covered over 200 square kilometers and was still expanding. Rivers flowed again for the first time in thousands of years. The future had arrived, and it looked nothing like what the galaxy expected. 6 months after the successful demonstration, Jake stood on a balcony of the royal palace and looked out over a landscape that seemed impossible. Where endless sand dunes had stretched before, now green fields covered the land as far as he could see. 3 rivers flowed through the capital city, their waters clear and cold from deep underground sources. Trees grew along the riverbanks, their leaves rustling in a wind that no longer carried only dust and heat. The population of Takran 7 had doubled. Refugees from other struggling worlds arrived every week, drawn by news of the transformation. King Orin had opened the borders, welcoming anyone who wanted to help build a new future. The city expanded rapidly, with new neighborhoods rising along the rivers. Children played in parks that had not existed half a year ago. Markets bustled, with actual fresh food grown in fields that had been dead desert. "It still does not feel real," Vera said, joining Jake on the balcony. She looked different now, no longer tired and worn down. Her eyes held confidence and purpose. She wore practical clothes instead of formal robes, having spent the morning in meetings with representatives from the Coalition of Emerging Worlds. "How did the negotiations go?" Jake asked. 12 more worlds want to join the coalition," Vera replied. "That brings us to 29 members. The Zenthari ambassador is furious. He called it an alliance of nobodies, trying to pretend they matter." Jake laughed. "An alliance of nobodies that is threatening the established power structure. No wonder they are upset." The Coalition of Emerging Worlds had grown faster than anyone expected. Species that had been dismissed, planets that had been ignored, colonies that had been forgotten. They all came together under Vera's leadership. The technology from Takran 7 was shared freely among coalition members. 4 worlds had already begun their own revival projects. 3 more were planning to start within months. But success brought new challenges. The Vrelian Empire was not pleased about losing its monopoly on energy production. They had tried economic pressure, political manipulation, and thinly veiled threats. When those failed, they began building military installations near coalition worlds, claiming it was for regional security. "We need a defense coordinator," Vera said. "Someone who understands military strategy, but also believes in what we are trying to build. Someone the coalition members trust." "You want me to take the position," Jake said. "Earth sent you a promotion offer last week. Commander of the Exploration Corps, based at Alliance headquarters. It is everything you worked for, Jake, A chance to return home as a hero. Ard, Jake had received the message. His mother had sent 3 excited communications after hearing the news. His friends congratulated him. Even people who had mocked his assignment to Takran 7 now praised his success. I turned it down, Jake said quietly. Vera looked at him with surprise. Why? That position is your dream. My dream changed, Jake replied. 6 months ago, maybe I would have taken it. But now I see what we are building here. The coalition is not just about technology or politics, Vera. It is about giving hope to people the galaxy forgot. I want to be part of that. I want to stay here and help protect what we created together. You would give up your career for this? For a coalition of nobodies? I would give it up for you, Jake said simply. The words hung in the air between them. Over the past months, their partnership had deepened into something neither had expected but both had felt growing. Late nights working together had turned into early morning walks through the transformed landscape. Professional respect had become personal admiration, and then something more. Jake, Vera said softly, I am still the Barren princess. I still carry that reputation, even if my world has changed. Marrying me would not help your standing in the galaxy. Good thing I do not care about standing in the galaxy anymore, Jake replied, stepping closer. You are the strongest, most brilliant person I know. You rebuilt a dead world through sheer determination. You created an alliance from nothing. You changed the future. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. Vera's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. The galaxy will laugh at us. A failed princess and a disgraced human officer. Let them laugh, Jake said. We have already proven them wrong about everything else. The wedding announcement 3 weeks later shocked exactly no one who had been paying attention. Lisa and Paul had been making bets about when Jake would finally propose. King Orin welcomed the match, having watched Jake and Vera work together and seeing how they balanced each other. The ceremony combined Takran traditions with human customs. It was held in the royal gardens, which now bloomed with native flowers that had not grown on the planet for 3,000 years. Representatives from all 29 coalition worlds attended. Even some alliance officials came, recognizing that this wedding represented something significant. The Vrelian Empire sent no representative, but everyone noticed their absence. Jake wore his military dress uniform. Vera wore traditional Takran royal robes in deep green, the color of growing things, of hope, of new beginnings. As they stood together before King Orin and spoke their vows, the garden filled with the sound of flowing water from nearby streams. You have chosen each other when the galaxy said you were both failures, King Orin said during the ceremony. You have proven that determination and hope are stronger than reputation and tradition. May your union be as transformative as what you have already accomplished together. After the ceremony, during the celebration feast, Lisa raised a glass in toast. To the two people everyone underestimated. You proved that being dismissed by the powerful just means you are free to change everything. The coalition continued to grow. Within a year, it would have 40 member worlds. Within 2 years, it would become a recognized power block in galactic politics. The major empires could no longer ignore entire segments of the galaxy, and the balance of power shifted in ways no one had predicted. But on that day, as Jake and Vera walked together through gardens that had been lifeless deserts 6 months before, as children from a dozen different species played in the grass, as refugees found new homes on a world that had welcomed them, the future seemed full of possibility. Do you ever regret it? Vera asked, holding Jake's hand. Giving up everything you worked for? Giving up everything you worked for. Jake looked at his wife, at the transformed world around them, at the people who had found hope when they thought none existed. I gave up nothing, he said. I gained everything. The galaxy had ridiculed the human assigned to the Barren princess. They had laughed at the impossible dream of reviving a dead world. They had dismissed the coalition as meaningless. The galaxy learned, too late, to never underestimate those with nothing to lose and everything to prove. And they learned to never, ever dismiss the human assigned to the impossible task, or the princess who refused to let her world die. Tachron 7 bloomed under twin suns, and its transformation was only the beginning. Claude is AI, and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5